Seoul, one of the biggest and most highly populated cities in the world, is seeing a high rise in demand for residences. This has led to the construction of numerous apartment complexes in the city, so much so that it turned the city into a concrete jungle. Everything in Seoul was flourishing until an earthquake of the highest scale occurred and destroyed the apartment complexes and turned them into ruins. The disaster destroyed every building except the Hwang Gung Apartment building. In the aftermath, survivors of the earthquake inhabit the Hwang Gung Apartments. The original residents try to sustain themselves along with many survivors from the neighboring complexes. However, this was no easy thing to do. The weather was extremely cold and it was getting worse. Food and water were all becoming scarce. As resources were depleting, living started to become difficult. The freezing weather started to cause people to act uncivilized. One of the apartments was almost destroyed by a fire caused by an altercation between the owner of the house and survivors, who got inside his house without permission to get warm. After the incident, the original members of the Hwang Gang apartment decide to meet to solve the imminent threat posed by the members of neighboring apartments and any chaos that may occur in the future. There is a disagreement among the members on whether they let the survivors stay or to let them leave and save their resources. But before deciding on the matter, they select a leader with a unanimous vote, Hwang Tak. He was the man who saved the apartment from a fire explosion. To solve the matter of the survivors, the members of the Hwang apartment put it to a vote. The result indicated that the majority of the members had decided to evict the survivors from the apartment. After being selected as leader of the Hwang Gang apartments, Hwang Tak assigns Min Seong to be head of the anti-crime task force, mentioning Min Seong's previous service in the military. Min Seong reluctantly agrees. The residents trick the survivors into coming out of the apartment by telling them they will receive empty homes from outside. But after they gather the survivors outside, Hwang Tak, along with some members of the residents armed with steel batons, thanks the survivors for all their efforts and orders them to leave the apartment complex. This was not received well by the survivors, and a fight broke out. At first, the survivors almost bulldozed their way into the building by force, but later on, the residents pushed back hard. They even began throwing stones from the top floors. The fight leaves Hwang Tak injured, but they manage to drive the survivors out. This action leaves the old and the young alike to die in the freezing climate, but the majority of the residents celebrate their victory after driving survivors out. Only Ma Young-hwa and Do-gyun are not happy with the decision to force the survivors out, but they have no choice but to cooperate with Hwang Tak and the rest of the leaders. In the next few days, the members of the Hwang Gang apartments work hard as a team and try to rebuild some infrastructure. The men participate in the labor work, which includes removing obstacles and constructing a fence around the apartment buildings. They also establish 3 main resident regulations, which are stated as follows. Only residents are allowed to live in the apartments. Leaving in and out of the compound at will is forbidden, and rations are distributed according to the work participation. Different teams were also created: the anti-crime team, the ration distribution team, the maintenance team, and the medical team. While the rest of Seoul is in ruins, the residents have now established a community with a set of guidelines. Under the leadership of Hwang Tak, the community is thriving. The next day, the men go out on a scavenger hunt for resources. The outside world is full of death and despair. The road is rocky and difficult, but the men keep marching on. They see corpses of women and children. Different explosions are seen at night. This cycle continues for a while, but they have almost covered most of the area, and they are running low on resources. One night, while Hwang Tak and the rest of the men are out hunting for resources, Ma Young-hwa receives a message from one of the survivors on a walkie-talkie. It was a little boy who stayed with Ma Young-hwa and her husband with her mother before the members drove out the survivors. It is revealed that Do-gyun, a previous leader of the residents who recused himself because of pain, has hidden some of the survivors in the apartments. Do-gyun quickly snatches the walkie-talkie from the boy. Before he closes the walkie-talkie, Ma Young-hwa tells him that she is on his side and she could help. After searching for a while, the men found a store with resources, but they are held at gunpoint and told to go back by another man who has his mouth to feed. Min Seong disables him by hitting him from the back, and they take many resources, including food and drink. After they get back to their building, they host a party and celebrate their new year. While the party was going on, a young girl named Haiwon suddenly showed up at the building. She had fled with her mother after her father was found cheating with another woman. After the earthquake, she was separated from her mother and came back to her house in the Hwang Gang apartment. After making her comfortable, they introduce her to her neighbor Hwang Tak, but she doesn't recognize him. Hwang Tak introduces the new member of the community and welcomes her. All seems to be going well for the Hwang Gang community until one day, a disagreement breaks out when the members are receiving rations. Mayong overhears about the fight at the store, which resulted in the death of a man. She goes home and confronts her husband, Min Seong, about it. Then, she tells him not to go on these hunts because of the effects it will have on him. For an unknown reason, Yong-tak, being accustomed to being called the hero of the community, is threatened by the new girl. He shows up at her apartment and tries to intimidate her, to force her to recognize him. She goes to Mayong and gets treatment for her wounds. The neighbors ask about her mother. They try to guilt her about leaving her mother, but she reminds them about the harsh reality outside the Hwang Gung Apartments. The neighbors tell Haiwan that she has a rude manner towards someone who just suddenly appeared and shared their resources. They tell her they are the chosen ones. Then they compared her behavior to her cheating father. This angers Haiwan, and she storms out of the room. Mayong follows her and tries to calm her down. While speaking in anger, Haiwan confesses about her neighbor, Yong-tak. She tells her that she never knew him. Meanwhile, a tragedy has occurred. One of the members of the Hwang Gung apartment has been found dead at the gate of the compound. They killed him for his gold teeth. This was done by one of the survivors, and they left a threatening note to the rest of the apartment members. After this event, Yong-tak takes the matter of security seriously and increases the number of guards. He assembles a team and searches the apartments. He knocks on Do-gyun's apartment. Despite their best efforts to hide, he finds the mother and child Do-gyun has been sheltering since the decision to throw out survivors was made. Even though Do-gyun fights for them, he has them forcibly thrown out and leaves them to die in the cold. After the sentence was carried out, Yong-tak reveals that Mayong has known about these survivors all along. Min Seong takes his wife to their apartment and asks her about the things she was accused of. Mayong-hwa confronts her husband about his late actions and tells him he is now looking like Yong-tak. She then tells him what she heard about Yong-tak from the new girl. But Min Seong doesn't believe her. Afraid for the safety of himself and his wife, Min Seong begs Yong-tak for his forgiveness on his knees. Yong-tak accepts the apology. Min Seong, now committed to enforcing the laws of the community, organizes his team and makes a door-to-door break-in into the apartments where hidden survivors were reported. During this operation, a lot of survivors were found and thrown out, while those who were found sheltering the survivors faced a public trial and their punishment was decided. Their punishment was to loudly say, "We were wrong," 200 times in front of the whole community. While the punishment was going on, Do-hyun, who was broken by what was done to the survivors, loudly expressed his disgust at the actions of the community and threw himself down from the top of the building. The residents give him a good funeral and cremate his body due to threats from scavengers outside. Myung-hwa is devastated by what happened to Do-gyun. She asks Haiwan about Yong-tak again. She tells her that she went to deliver a package to his apartment, but this wasn't the man who opened the door. Haiwan also tells Do-gyun that she suspects he has been hiding something ever since he came by her apartment to threaten her. Meanwhile, the community is about to run out of food, and they look to their leader again. Yeong-tuk, who is distracted after seeing Hye-won and Myung-hwa together, suggests going out and hunting for food. While they were gone, Myung-hwa and Hye-won sneak into Young-tuk's apartment to search for anything he may be hiding. They find a bedridden old woman whom Young-tuk claims to be his mother. Myung-hwa tries to force the old woman to tell her the truth about Young-tuk, but the old woman only ends up telling her that she is hungry. Heartbroken by the question of the old woman, Myung-hwa and Hye-won open the fridge to give her food, but instead, they find a dead body. The body belongs to the real Young-tuk. This meant the man who had been leading the community was an imposter. Earlier in the movie, while the man who had been impersonating Young-tuk was celebrating with the group, a flashback takes him back to the day the earthquake had occurred. The imposter's real name was Mo Se-beom, a taxi driver who was conned by the real Yeong-tuk, who was a lawyer. Se-beom went to the apartment and confronted Yeong-tuk, and Se-beom killed Yeong-tuk because of the altercation that occurred while they were arguing. After the earthquake, Se-beom assumed the identity of the man he killed and continued to care for the old woman. Meanwhile, the men looking for food are suddenly attacked by scavengers. The attack caused the death of Ji-hyuk and the injury of many others. They make it out alive and bring back the body of Ji-hyuk, and his mother is devastated. In the middle of this chaos, Myung-hwa accuses Se-beom in front of everybody and presents the wallet of the real Young-tuk. Se-beom then tells the residents about the huge amount of money he paid to the man. He firmly shouts at the residents and tells them he is the rightful owner. After seeing the evidence, the angry residents turned on him and began to push him out. The angry Se-beom frees himself, attacks Hye-won, and throws her into the debris. Min Seong, who was trying to calm everyone down, points a gun at Se-beom, and asks him if it is all true. But Sebeom snatches the gun from him and threatens to kill anyone who comes after him. While everyone's focus was on Sebeom, more scavengers and survivors showed up to attack the residents. They wage war for the control of the Hwang Gung Apartments. The survivors begin their attack on the residents. Sebeom, determined to show his devotion to the residents, fights well. The survivors use a makeshift bomb to attack the resident, but Sebeom quickly picks it up and throws it back to the survivors. The bomb exploded and killed a lot of people. Sebeom, who sustained an injury from the blast, was allowed by the residents to go back to his apartment. After reaching his apartment, he passes out. The next morning, the survivors of the aftermath are seen leaving the Hwang Gung Apartments. As for Mi Young-hwa and Min Seong, after overcoming an attack from one of the survivors, they escape the war and take refuge in a nearby church. Min Seong, who has sustained a fatal injury, dies the next morning. Ma Young-hwa cries after seeing the death of her husband. While mourning the death of her husband, she is spotted by a group of survivors. After she buries her husband, they invite her to travel with them. At the end of the movie, Ma Young-hwa is accepted into the group without any preconditions, and they give her a chance at life. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.